Let's move on and talk about every club's breakout player in 2025. Last week we went through some awards, the player awards going into 2025. But I thought today, we did this last year, and I think I got a couple right, and I think my brother did as well. But we're going to be taking a look at the breakout player at every single club. So a player that really hasn't been noticed, really hasn't been seen, but I think in 2025, these guys are going to explode. They're going to be on the scene. These are the guys to watch. So, for Adelaide, I've picked Riley Thilthorpe. For Brisbane, Kitty Coleman. Carlton, Ollie Hollands. Collingwood, Ed Allen. Essendon, Nate Caddy. Fremantle, Nathan O'Driscoll. Geelong, Toby Conway. Gold Coast, Bailey Humphrey. GWS, Lee Kalia. Hawthorn, McDonald. North Melbourne, McKercher. Port Adelaide, Burgoyne. Richmond, Tom Brown. St Kilda, Mateus Filippo. Sydney, Caden Cleary. West Coast, Harley Reid. And then Western Bulldogs, Riley West. So, I think there's a couple that are kind of self-explanatory. I think that players like Coleman and Thilthorpe, considering they had a lot of injuries throughout last year, obviously Coleman had that ACL and Thilthorpe missed the majority of the season through injury, that I think they're pretty self-explanatory. I think a lot of people said that they were going to break out in 2024. So I think these guys, I don't think I have to explain them. But I'll go through a couple. So first of all, I want to take a look at Ollie Hollands at Carlton, because people may not really be following his preseason or may not have talked about Ollie Hollands much. He's shown some good signs as a wingman for Carlton, but there's been talk that he's going to be moving the halfback for Carlton this year. And I think this is a great move. He's going to get more of the footy. He's already shown that he's a great runner. I think this guy should be a much watch. I think with his new role playing in defence, I think he's going to get more of the footy, more notice, and I think that he's ready to go. I think this is a much watch player going into 2025. Ed Allen for Collingwood. Now, Collingwood's kind of hard because a lot of the players that could be breaking out or whatever had a lot of down years last year. Like, I thought of maybe picking Lockie Schultz, but I thought maybe pick someone a little bit younger. So Ed Allen was a player that caught my eye. I think that Collingwood are going to pick some younger players around the mark if they have spots available throughout the season. Ed Allen played a couple of games last year for Collingwood, but he's basically the pick of the bunch of the young players for the Pies. I expect him to get games throughout the season, and I think that this guy is going to be someone to watch. I think he's a good midfielder that Collingwood want to build around. So hopefully he gets some games. I don't know if he's going to get the games though. This is the problem, and it's going to be hard to see if Collingwood get players this year who are going to break through and who are the breakout players, especially if they are young. I think there may be a couple of seniors, like maybe Lockie Schultz, who had a pretty poor year last year, but I think Ed Allen's the one I'm going to watch for Collingwood. Now, the Gold Coast, I've picked Bailey Humphrey. Now, he admitted last year that he was trying to live up to the comparisons of him and Dusty Martin, which he said he's learned from that. He's had a good preseason for the Gold Coast. He was one player that had the second-year blues, and I think he's one to watch. I think he's shown some good signs throughout his short career so far. I like the look of him. He's a tough player. He's got a good goal sense. So I think he can play around that forward line for the Gold Coast. I think that small forward, hybrid forward, I think that's a Gold Coast position that can be filled by him. So I think that's where he's going to improve this year. On the Giant, Lee Kalia, the fact that Haynes has left the club, I think he'll get his shot now. You've got a couple of other ones there, Himmelberg, who may lock him out of that spot. But I think that Lee Kalia is ready to go. If he gets his spot in there for the Giants, I think that there's a spot for him. And he showed some signs last year when Taylor was injured that he's got some good knowledge of playing defence for the Giants. So I think he's good to see. Now, McDonald for Hawthorn, I think this guy's ready to explode after some more experience in the seniors in 2024. I think this guy could be one of their best players going into this year. I think he played quite more half forward for Hawthorn. Wasn't really talked about as much as like a Ginnivan or whatever, but he has a lot of personality. I think he's going to be one of the favourites of Hawthorn, especially their younger supporter base that they're starting to grow now. And I think this guy's ready for a big season. I think he's going to get a little bit more midfield time for Hawthorn, and I think he's got good goal sense, which is really good for a young guy. I think you get more midfield minutes this year, and I think that he's ready to go. Now, Burgoyne. So for Port Adelaide, I think if anyone saw the semi-final from Jace Burgoyne, I think a lot of you would realise why he's on this list. But yeah, his semi-final playing off halfback, the fact that Dan Houston has left now, I think that he's going to get that role. He's a good user, good runner. And I've said that about a couple of players now, but Jace Burgoyne, I think he's in for a massive year for Port Adelaide. He's always been in the shadow of his father, and I think it's his uncle in Sean Burgoyne, but I think he's ready to go. He just needs to bulk up a little bit. He's very lanky. So if he can build his body just a little bit, get those 25 touches a game, what Dan Houston was doing, this guy could be a huge bolter this year. Could be one of the best breakout players for the 2025. Richmond, Tom Brown. Now, Richmond, it's hard to say who's going to be the breakout player. You could pick a bunch of them. Kane McAuliffe was one that I thought of as well. But Tom Brown, there's been so many exits. This guy is expected to go back in 2025. A lot of people, he's played a little bit of wing, a little bit of everywhere, but he's had great skills, and a lot of Tigers fans, from my understanding, are really keen on this guy. So I think he's going to get a good run of form. Like, he's going to get games, you would expect, as long as he's having decent form in the preseason and stuff, this guy's going to get games. So I think Tom Brown's in for a big year for Richmond, and we'll just have to wait and see, really. I mean, the Tigers could have anyone, really. Harley Reid. It may be a bit of an interesting choice, saying that he's going to be a breakout player, because obviously the guy everyone expects is going to be like massive. Obviously, Harley Reid. Everyone loves him. Everyone thinks that he's going to be the next Chris Judd or whatever. But I think he had some down times last year, especially when he started to get like tagged. As long as he builds his body, as long as he can like hold up to the rigors of playing midfield minutes, because he did have times last year when he just couldn't run out games and had to be moved forward. But if he can spend 80% of time in the midfield and then 20% up forward, I think he's in for a big year. Maybe a big call, maybe too much of a call, maybe a real hot take. But I can see him being top 3 in the best and fairest for West Coast in 2025 if he can play those midfield minutes. So I think Harley Reid's in for a big year. Another one who comes to mind is Elijah Hewitt, but I've taken a big leap of faith and I've picked Harley Reid. And finally, for the Western Bulldogs, I've picked Riley West. He was fighting for this spot for me with Riley Sanders. The reason why I've picked West here is because I think he has a point to prove. The fact that he wasn't in that team in the final, I think they picked James Harmes over him. I mean, there was a big talking point, the fact that he wasn't in the team. I think this guy's got Toby Green aspects about him, but he just doesn't get a good run of it, and he's not consistent enough. I think with a good preseason, the fact that McRae has left, the fact that Daniel has left, the fact that they were just chucking these these midfielders or defenders like Daniel into that forward line just to get them to fill spots in their team, I think just don't worry about it. They need to actually get actual forward-crafted players. Cody Waitman needs to have a good year as well. With them guys leaving and so much reliance on the key 3, you got Darcy, Norton, Ugle-Hagan. They need someone who's that hybrid forward who can kick goals but also bring pressure. Waitman has tried to show it, but I think he's too small. I think West is that size, that Toby Green size that can go up to the wing but get back forward and kick goals. And I think this guy's in for a big year. And I think if the Bulldogs are to break back into a final spot, he needs to be the one to push them forward, have a 40-goal year. And I think that he can do that. So that's why I've picked Riley West. So those guys are my breakout players for 2025. Make sure to let me know who you think are the breakout players or who you think your club's breakout player is going to be in 2025. Make sure to let me know if I'm wrong. Make sure to let me know if you agree with a couple of them. Let me know in the comment section below.